I'm a really big fan of Greek mythology and Greek mythology retellings. They are one of the few retelling stories where I don't think I ever get bored. I love seeing new takes. I love seeing how modern authors tackle the themes and the characters. Even when you're setting the book in a historical setting, that modern viewpoint, I love seeing how that gets influenced as we go along. Last year I did a reading vlog that was 3 Greek mythology stories. The intention was that they would be set around like male characters, heroes or gods from mythology, but then one of them I miscalculated. But I looked at Hymn to Dionysus, I looked at Wearing the Lion, really good Hercules story viewed through a lens of toxic or non-toxic masculinity. And then I thought I was reading a Hercules Disney Twisted Tale, but it was actually Meg, so we'll forget about that. This week I've got 3 female lead Greek mythologies that I want to look at. They've been sitting on my shelf for so long, they've been top of my TBR for so long, and I just haven't got to them, so this feels like, you know, it's gonna motivate me, it's the time. The first one is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen, probably the loosest of the retellings. There's a bit of a Hunger Games free-for-all tournament type of deal where our main character is Hades' representative in the competition. I've heard such good things. It does have a sequel that came out towards the end of last year, so if I enjoy this one, if I love this one, maybe I'll pick it up straight away. But more so I'm just hoping to enjoy this one enough that I really want to grab the sequel. Then I have 2 books by the same author, which tells you how long the first one has been on my TBR. This is The End Crowns All by B. Fitzgerald. It's the second book in a kind of standalone series she's had. I loved Girl, Goddess, Queen, which was a feminist take on the Hades and Persephone myth. This one looks at Cassandra and Helen of Troy. These books are absolutely stunning, both on the cover with those really bright colours and under the dust jackets as well. They're just absolutely beautiful additions, and I'm really hoping I'm gonna love them because they look so good on my shelf. This one I think might be sapphic, so that should be really fun. This is A Beautiful Lie, and as far as I know this one is Pandora. Again, just to show you it without the dust jacket. They're such pretty books. I'm genuinely torn about whether to put these on my shelf with their dust jackets or without. This one I know even less about than the last one. I think this one is a male-female romance, and I don't actually know what we're doing other than it's Pandora. The End Crowns All, I at least assume, is giving us a slight take on the Trojan War, but we'll see. I have really high expectations for all these books while knowing nothing about them, so this might go horribly wrong, but I've enjoyed B. Fitzgerald in the past. I've heard nothing but good things about Abigail Owens, so I have a hope that this might be an all 4 and 5 star reading vlog. Fingers crossed. Okay, so Everand says I am roughly, I think, on 48%, so we're about halfway through A Beautiful Evil. This is the 3rd B. Fitzgerald book in this not a trilogy, but it's the most recent release, so I decided to go with this one first. I have no logic behind it. I kind of thought it might be quite good to split the B. Fitzgerald books and put the Games Gods Play in the middle, and then this was just the one that it popped up on Everand, so I thought, you know, this will be the one I do. This is about Pandora, who is the first woman. She is moulded by the gods to be the perfect companion. Her whole purpose is to be, love, and to love Timaeus. He is one of the titans that has stood with the gods in their war, and he's the brother of Prometheus, who stood against the gods. Prometheus stole fire from the gods to protect humanity with, and as such is punished by being chained to a rock and having his liver pecked out every day. Pandora is sent as a reward to Matthias, but when she turns up, knowing that her only purpose is to love him and be loved by him, she finds that he doesn't want her. He doesn't want her, and he doesn't trust her. He doesn't trust the gods. He doesn't believe that she's there for any good purpose. When she then suggests that maybe he should just like let her go. He's like, no, he can't do that either, because he can't show disrespect to the gods and he doesn't know why she was there. Two of them are sort of trapped in this house together. Pandora is learning who she is. She has a lot more time in her hands and she begins, I guess, to maybe more self-actualize. She seems to find more things that she is interested in, things that are her personality coming through. They're in close quarters together. There's a kind of grumpy sunshine dynamic between them, a kind of Beauty and the Beast angle. They're gradually moving around each other. That is just the setup. That is the opening chapters. At this halfway point, most of the book has been very much a character study. We have been seeing Pandora, like I said, kind of self-assess, coming into herself, and we've been seeing the two of them as characters, this relationship, push and pull between them, but there's not been a lot of action. Now the kind of major turning point seems to be the two of them off on a quest together. They are going to find Prometheus. I have been enjoying the book so far. I've been really enjoying B. Fitzgerald's writing style. I find it really readable. I could debate here and there whether these books are YA with slightly older characters or whether these are adult books but written in a way that is, I think, designed for readers who have come up through YA and are now into adult books. They do have something of a YA quality about the writing. Whether they are published as YA or adult, I'm not quite sure, and I don't actually care enough to look, but it does give them a real readability. You're able to flow through them really, really quickly. From what I remember of Girl, Goddess, Queen, there was a lot of action in that one. There was a lot of banter in the romance. This one has been maybe a slower start, but I'm excited to see where it's going next. Now, it has been a while since I read Girl, Goddess, Queen, which is the first book in this kind of standalone but Greek mythology inspired vibe universe that B. Fitzgerald has been writing. It's also the only book I've read from her in the past, but I do remember really, really enjoying it. And I'm going to say right up front, I think what I thought previously about the writing still stands. I think this book, and maybe, you know, B. Fitzgerald in general, is an excellent example of where new adult would make for a great category, where it should be a bigger category than it is, and not just because if a book has a certain amount of spice in it. This one, the romance is very heavy. The romance is a major point in the book, but while it has a couple of fade to black scenes, it's not spicy. However, I also wouldn't say it's a young adult book. The ages are kind of irrelevant. Pandora has been created from scratch. She's months old, or, you know, Mace is centuries old. It's Greek mythology. The ages they don't track that well. But I wouldn't say that they feel like teenagers. These feel like adults. The issues they're dealing with are not teenage problems. They are adult problems. But the writing feels more young adult, more accessible, quite, you know, easy to read. It's not too overly descriptive. It's not too complicated in its vocabulary. I think this is a perfect example of a new adult book. It's got the best of both worlds. It's hitting in that middle point. It's transitioning you from that one age category to the other really, really well. And it's a really good way of showing that the new adult genre, I really wish it was a bigger thing, and I wish that it wasn't just being reduced down to books that are young adult but with spice, because this doesn't have any spicy scenes, but I definitely think it would fit perfectly in new adult if publishers would just embrace that as a category. I'm not sure where it got put. I think it might have been put down as upper YA, which just use new adult, but that's a different tangent. I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a really easy read. What I did find is that in that second half, I found my attention wandering a little bit. I was listening to the audio. I don't know if that would have been improved if I had been reading a physical copy, but it wasn't that I wasn't listening. I wasn't as hooked as I wanted to be. I found myself kind of drifting a little bit and having to wind back a minute or two. So I just wasn't as immersed and as grabbed as I would have liked. I did really enjoy that we got some friendships in this story. Pandora had some other friends kicking about, both actual, I mean not human, they were nymphs, but like humanish friends. and also she had her mechanical dog companion. I really liked that they gave her people to talk to when she wasn't with Matthias. She got to build her own kind of character outside of him, and I thought that was really important because just in the actual premise of this book, you have Pandora. She exists to love this man and to be loved by this man. And so the very premise of the book sets us up for insta-love. And yes, there's a grumpy sunshine element to it that kind of works to counteract that a little and gives us a little bit of time for those characters to grow and develop together. But it's still, it's very much a romance without too much conflict. Conflict comes externally. And I like though that having those other friendships around gave you a little bit of room for Pandora to just to be who she is, and then have her who she is with Matthias being something that comes along. Without giving too many spoilers away, she does something really clever that sort of explains all those inconsistencies in mythology. And I mean, you could put it to any mythology, but Greek specifically, obviously, where you have timelines that don't quite mesh up. You have one version of the story where something happens with one character, and some versions where that character is a completely different person, a different relation. She kind of created a situation at the end of this book that allows for different interpretations, slightly different aspects of the myth coming through in different ways, those inconsistencies from stories that have been told and retold from different perspectives with different agendas over time, losing and picking up things depending on the culture and who is telling the story. This little kind of like pivot point she puts at the end of this one makes all that make sense in her world, and I thought it was really nice. It was really kind of smart and clever, and made her mythology feel like something that is maybe potentially a history of our world, while making sure that, you know, it's still mythology. I just don't know that it lived up to my expectations, because I'm sure I rated Girl, Goddess, Queen, I'm not sure exactly what I rated it, but I know it was kind of high, and I think maybe, whether I did or not, I think maybe I had maybe given myself too high hopes for this one, because I'm remembering really enjoying the previous one. This, I think, maybe somewhere around a 3 or a 3.5, but I did really enjoy it. It didn't quite scratch the itch I was looking for. The next one that I'm gonna pick up is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen, just because that puts a little breaker in between the B. Fitzgerald books. This one is, I think, of the three, the most retold retelling, if that makes sense. B. Fitzgerald's two are, yes, they're retellings, and she does make them quite feminist, but a lot of the parts are the Greek mythology. This one, as far as I'm aware, it's mostly just the fact of you have the Greek gods and their pantheon, but the rest of it seems to be very much original in that we have a modern world, we have the gods holding a contest where they pick mortals to kind of be their champion. I think there's a bit of a romance there, which I'm not sure how I feel about, because I have been a Hades and Persephone fangirl since I was like a child, and I'm not sure how I feel about Hades having a romance with anyone else, with an original character. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm at chapter 37, Walk the Plank, and I'm having a good time with it. I just want to show you, I got this really cute bookmark the last time I was in Argonauts in Edinburgh. Obviously they're Argonauts, so they have a kind of Greek mythology theming to their merchandise, the orange and black, and they always have a big stack of some different designed bookmarks at the till that you can grab when you're in. So I picked up this one just before Christmas, I think, and I think it works. We are in a modern day San Francisco that just happens to also be home to the Olympian gods. The Crucible is approaching, which is a every 100-year event where the gods each pick a human champion to fight on their behalf, and the winning champion's god gets to rule as the king of the gods for the next 100 years. The current, reigning champion is Zeus, but now it's all up for grabs. What's unusual this year is that Hades has also chosen to take part. He says in memory of his deceased wife Persephone. Our protagonist is Lyra. She is a young thief, so technically she's sort of contracted, I guess, to Hermes, but she's been abandoned as a child, left to a kind of thieves gang because she was born in Zeus's temple and that was disrespectful, so Zeus cursed her so that she will never know love or be loved. So she has a connection to Zeus as well. But she stumbles across Hades in one of the early chapters. He seems to take a shine to her, and lo and behold, of course, she is picked as Hades champion, which puts her at quite a disadvantage because she's unusual. Hades isn't usually taking part. Everyone else seems to either fear him or distrust him because he's the god of death. The other champions all have what are called virtues. They get split into kind of 1 or 4 categories, and therefore they have allies. Whereas Lyra's only virtue is survival. She's all on her own, and that puts her at disadvantages in various ways in the competition. Not just the allies and alliances, but the perks that those allies get within their teams. She obviously doesn't have that. The bulk of the book has then been the challenges. We've had 2. One was like an initial challenge that wasn't counted, and then the second one was a proper trial. And we've been told that there will be 12 different challenges. Some of them will be to do with saving mortals, some of them will be mental puzzles, some of them might be obstacle courses, and others will be more along the lines of Hercules' labours. So different strengths and weaknesses. As with every trial book nowadays, you could probably compare it a little bit to the Hunger Games, but it reminds me more of the Sunbather trials, and I'm actually having a really good time with it. I do have some, they're not problems, they're queries that I'm mulling over. Right up front, I didn't think I was gonna like a book that had Hades and a romance that wasn't Persephone. I am really curious as to what has happened to Persephone preceding this book. She's a god, and we've been told that, you know, the gods are immortal, they can't be killed, so what happened to her? I'm curious about. But I am really enjoying that romance between Lyra and Hades. It's a kind of begrudging romance. There's definitely an attraction between them. There is a fondness on his part that comes through. She seems, again, there's an attraction there, but she does seem to be being won over by him. I guess it's a little bit of a Beauty and the Beast situation, but I'm really enjoying the dynamic between them. I'm also kind of interested in this curse that Zeus has put upon her. She talks about it a lot, and I don't want to say she sounds resentful about it, because if you were cursed by a god, I assume you would be resentful, but she does harp on about it a bit. And I don't know, it's an interesting curse, this, that she'll never be loved, because from what I've seen so far, maybe not love, but she definitely has people that care about her. There's the romantic love, there's that attraction with Hades, and he, as I said, seems very fond of her. But we also see some of the people she's grown up with, their fellow thieves. We do see her thief mentor friend break into Hades' home so that he can give Lyra some gifts, some tools, some magical artifacts that are going to help her along the way. He also just brings her like some of her own clothes and things to make her more comfortable. He's going to a lot of risk to help her, and he's giving up some really valuable items of his own. I would count that as a type of love. And then she seems, as I said, she gets on really well with Hades up front. The other gods not so much, we've not seen them. But from what we've seen of Aphrodite, she's getting on really well with Aphrodite, who I really like kind of her portrayal in this. I want to see more of her. And then the other tribute, the other contestants, yes, obviously, she doesn't have the natural alliances that they have, and they do seem to be a little distrustful of her because she's Hades champion. But after the first trial, she is starting to look at making alliances, and it doesn't seem that she's necessarily any more disadvantaged than anyone else would be. So I have my questions about this curse, and whether she is actually under a curse or whether she's just been told she is. I'm interested to see how that plays out. The characters are fun. It's a really pacey book, and the trial structure obviously keeps you coming back for the next part. I'm enjoying the world building, and I think I'm probably going to finish it fairly quickly. I had a great time with the Games Gods play. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I went into this. I knew that it was going to be quite a actiony romantasy rather than a kind of dreamy romantasy or a really sultry romantasy. I knew that this one had that trials aspect, and it is what I had the best time with in this. There was so much variety in them. There were so many different types of trial, but each trial is designed by a different god. Each god has a different sort of realm, different strengths. They're trying to favour their own candidate in the process. So seeing the different trials come through from the different gods was a lot of fun. We weren't having this same thing again and again. It kept it fresh. It also meant that it felt like Lyra was constantly being challenged. She didn't have a chance to get comfortable. Even when she did really well in a task, it didn't mean she had any real kind of guarantees going into the next one, especially with how much she struggled to form alliances with her fellow competitors, especially with how many things even outside of the trials were against her. Being Hades' champion and that being so unusual, the demons knowing that Hades had given her some items to help out almost worked against her in a lot of ways because she was under a lot more scrutiny than she might otherwise have been. It kept me on my toes. There were some characters that I really liked. I hope we're going to see more of in future books. I'm thinking Boone, Aphrodite, some of the other contestants, and of course Persephone does turn up, well, is mentioned eventually. She doesn't turn up, but we do find out a bit more about Abigail Owen's interpretation of Hades and Persephone and what has happened to her before the novel that has pushed Hades to pick Lyra as his champion. I actually didn't mind it. I'm usually really open to people changing things in mythology retellings, but I still have that thing where I'm just like, Hades and Persephone go together, and it feels strange to split them up. It still just feels strange to me, but I enjoyed it. I really liked Lyra and Hades together. It was a nice push-pull between them. One of the things that came through more from Lyra's character and ties in maybe with the book overall, one of the things I did have an issue with, was that Lyra to me felt quite young. She felt like a Katniss type of character, someone in her late teens. The life she's lived, I feel like she should be acting older than she is. She's an adult, she's in her 20s, and she felt more like someone around that 18, 19 age group to me. I'm not sure if it was the writing or if it was her attitude or some of her complaints, which she's allowed, I guess. Partly it was that constant refrain about how she's unlovable, while the narrative clearly shows us that she is loved. If it's a curse, then Zeus done a terrible job of it, because it doesn't really seem to have affected her ability to make human connections. So, I don't know. But the other thing was that partly because of how Lyra feels as a character, and partly because I guess of the paciness, I guess of the writing, I guess of the focus, this to me felt more like an upper YA book than A Beautiful Lie did. Yes, there are some spicy scenes in this, like I'm not saying there aren't. There are scenes in this that if they were in a YA would be inappropriate, but overall the book felt younger. And I get that the spicy scenes are partly what contribute to whether we think of something as YA or adult, but I personally don't think it should be the only thing. I think that spicy scenes do not an adult novel make. To me, this was upper YA with some smutty scenes added in, rather than being an adult novel. And I'm not sure what that tipping point is, or if I feel it more at the moment because I've just come off another Greek mythology and I was thinking about it, but that's my thought. However we're categorizing it, that doesn't change the fact that I really enjoyed it. I'll be really interested to see, I think, the next book, where Owens goes with it, because the trials were so important to this book, to the plot, important to the pacing. The trials told us a lot about characters. They were very well used as a trope. I'll be interested to see in the next book, where she doesn't have the trials, how she manages to keep that pacing up, how she manages to weave in so many characters, if she manages to weave in so many characters, whether she cuts the cast down substantially in the next one to focus more on specific characters. I'll be interested to see where it goes from here, because this was such a high stakes, action packed, busy book. It ends on such a dramatic high note. This is probably sitting at around a 4 for me, and it's definitely a series that I definitely want to continue with. In fact, it's going to be the first book series of 2026 that goes into my new C for series jar. Yeah, I hate myself a little bit for that. So I am this far through the End Crowns All. The amount of times I have written this the wrong way around, or I've said it the wrong way around. I keep calling it the Crown Ends All, which still sounds quite dramatic, but it's the End Crowns All, and if I mess that up, I don't care. Forgive me. So I'm about chapter 15, which is quite a high number in terms of chapters, but this, as with A Beautiful Lie, the chapters are quite short, they move through them fairly quickly. The total number of chapters in the book as a whole is up somewhere in the 70s, so we're kind of mathing round about 15, maybe 20 at a push % of the book. Still very early doors and still very much in the setup section. I wouldn't say anything that I'm going to talk about right now is really that spoilery, especially if you know anything about Greek mythology. This is all very much just setting the scene before the story really kicks off. What I am noticing about this book in comparison, both in relation to the other B. Fitzgerald books I've read, so obviously A Beautiful Lie earlier this week and Girl Goddess Queen, from what I remember when I read it a while ago, and also of the 3 books in this vlog so far, is that this is by far, I feel like, the darkest book. It's the heaviest book. I don't want to say it's the most depressing book, but that's definitely the vibe I'm getting. The weight in this one just feels far more intense. And I think that's partly to do with this setup for both Cassandra and for Helen, her 2 main POV characters. Cassandra is a spoiled princess of Troy. To avoid being given away in marriage, she signed up to be a priestess of Apollo, and she's basically had a fairly easy life doing that. But one day, a man appears in Troy claiming to be the lost Prince Paris. Paris has an interesting backstory. When he was born, it was prophesied that he would lead to the downfall of Troy, and so the king and queen abandoned him and left him to die on a mountainside. Fate intervened and Paris survived and grew into manhood, and through a series of events has ended up back at Troy to claim his rightful place as one of the heirs to the throne. The king and queen seem thrilled to have him back, clearly regretting those life choices, but Cassandra is uncomfortable about this right from the start. She, as a priestess of Apollo, knows a lot about prophecy and is a little concerned that they're just ignoring the prophecy that, however many years ago, was such a big deal. So she goes to Apollo to pray for guidance, and the god appears to her himself. He offers her a deal that feels very coercive, but she does take the deal. In exchange for true prophetic power, for true prophecies, to be elevated just from a priestess to an oracle, Cassandra will sleep with Apollo. And she agrees to it ultimately and fully intends on going through with it. It's stated quite clearly in Cassandra's reflections in her POV. She doesn't want to be portrayed as someone who took what they could and didn't intend to follow through on her half of the bargain. Despite all her reservations, she fully intends on following through. But when that moment comes, she just can't bring herself to, and she rejects first Apollo, and then she offers to undo the deal they had. She rejects his gifts as well. And between these 2 things, you don't piss off the gods. He flies into a rage, and there's a real threat, I will point out in that moment, there's a real kind of threat of rape in the air. But what he ends up doing is cursing Cassandra that she will continue with the prophecy, she'll continue to see the future, if anything, escalating that, but that no one will believe her. So Cassandra's visions do increase. She sees the war that's coming. She sees it both on a grand scale, but also in a really personal scale. The death of her brothers, the way their corpses will be desecrated, it's horrific. And the more she tries to tell people what she sees, the more they don't believe her, the more they think she's doing it for attention, the more both her family and the city at large start to dislike her. And she really becomes quite isolated and quite alone through this process. Our second protagonist is Helen, the queen of Sparta. She's already married, but when Paris judges a competition between three goddesses, Aphrodite promises him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. And so obviously Helen and Paris fall deeply in love. They run away together, fleeing from Sparta and Helen's marriage and heading to Troy. This sets in motion the entire Trojan War to come. Cassandra is the only one that sees that. She's the only one with a lick of common sense in this city. The king, the queen, all of her brothers, they welcome Helen with open arms. The city welcomes her, and Helen is doing her best to make a home here. All she knows is that she left her husband for Paris, who she loves deeply because Aphrodite obviously made her love him deeply. So there's again that element of coercion there, how much of Helen's love for Paris comes from her and how much of it comes from the will of the gods. But now she's also in a foreign city full of strangers, and if her husband finds her, he's the kind of person that would rather see her dead than have it be known that she went away of her own free will. That would be worse than her having been kidnapped. She is really on her own here and she has to make it work. And we see there, that's where her and Cassandra come into conflict. Cassandra is willing to do almost anything to get Helen out of the city, whereas Helen really has no other option but to claim its protections. And I think part of what makes this book feel heavier than specifically A Beautiful Lie is that the problems these two women are facing, once you take all of the gods out of the equation, once you take that magical, mythological shine off it, the problems these women are facing are very much rooted in history. They're rooted in society, both in ancient Greek and in a lot of ways still nowadays, whereas Pandora and Persephone's problems felt more individual. They felt more like something that was happening just to that person and could therefore be fought against in a way that it doesn't feel like Cassandra or Helen can really do much, because even if they overcome the specifics of their situation, those magical elements, the interference from the gods, where they are as women in society is kind of unchanged. Cassandra, even before Apollo's curse, when she is just having visions but should be believed, goes to the council, goes to her brothers, her father, the men of Troy, and tells them that this war is coming. And they don't believe her. They say that women don't have the emotional fortitude to be prophets, that seeing the future is just, it's beyond their tiny little minds and their fragile emotional states. They specifically say that she doesn't know anything about war. And how can she? She's never been given a chance. But despite the fact that now she is chosen by the gods, by this really powerful god, specifically of prophecy, the men still think that she must be misunderstanding the signs. They still won't take her word for the disaster that's about to unfold. And I think that is something that probably rings true in a lot of situations where a woman knows more than a man on a subject and still won't be listened to, won't be believed, won't be trusted. And there's obviously the aspect with Cassandra and Apollo. There's that coercion into sex. Cassandra doesn't want to sleep with any man. She specifically doesn't want to sleep with Apollo. She is really aware that to gain any sort of freedom, any sort of power in this world, she needs something that he is offering, and therefore she kind of finds herself going along. And it doesn't present her as a victim here. This isn't taking away the agency that she made this choice, but it does really make you think about what other choices she had. When she rejects Apollo, we get that scene where there's no direct assault, there's definitely no rape, but it's very in the air. You sense the danger that she's alone with him. So she can't fight against his godly powers, she can't fight against him physically, and even if she could, would anyone believe her if she did somehow resist him and then told them what happened? Again, all of this manipulation, the coercion, it feels very relatable to what a lot of women would go through in maybe in corporate societies, in workplaces. There's a lot of power dynamics going on. And then we have Helen. There's a little bit with the coercion on her feelings, but more so we do see a moment where Helen almost sees through that lust, that love that she's feeling for Paris, he makes some comment and she suddenly is starkly aware that yes, he loves her, he does, but he also sees her very much as a prize that he has won or been gifted. And she is aware that that is what she has always been. She was kidnapped, she was rescued by the benevolence of men and groomed into being the perfect wife for her husband. And now, once again, she's a prize. She's very aware of the way that she is being dehumanized by men and I guess by society in general. And to come back to my original point that I have massively strayed from, all of those things together make this book, I personally think, feel a lot more angsty, a lot more... weighty is the word I definitely keep coming back to. A lot more weighty than A Beautiful Lie or Girl Goddess Queen or The Games Gods Play, different author. But again, in that, Lyra's problems are Lyra's problems and she's able to fight to overcome them. Even the odds are so stacked against her in those competitions, but she is still able to exert herself to try and overcome her problems, whereas I feel like for Helen and Cassandra, they almost don't even have that amount of agency to play with. Helen and Cassandra are giving you the ultimate enemies to lovers. They dislike each other massively, but also their wants and desires and their needs are so diametrically opposed. You know, sometimes you're like, are they really enemies or are they just rivals, or are they just like, we don't really like each other? They are genuinely enemies to lovers, and I think before we get past that, it's definitely gonna get worse. In a lot of ways, this was the perfect book to end this vlog with. This was by far the standout. It was, as I thought and as I said, a darker book than I had been expecting. Definitely a darker book when you compare it to A Beautiful Lie, even though it's the same author and they're in vaguely one of those standalone books in a connected world type of feel. Cassandra and Helen had a much darker story. They had a much more tragic story to come. The book itself is entirely set during the events of the Trojan War. Maybe that's why my mind kept going to the Song of Achilles. Obviously, Song of Achilles, I think, starts a little earlier than the Trojan War. We see the build-up of Achilles and Patroclus, their lives together, their romance. But the bulk of the story, all of the events that I think are the ones you remember, happen as a retelling of the Iliad, and so does this. And maybe that's all it is, and that's where that kind of link was sparking. But I did very much get Song of Achilles vibes, and I actually don't think it's that common setting. Yeah, that definitely plays a part. Having it be Troy during the siege, this time obviously we're inside the walls rather than out on the battlefield, but having it be that common setting definitely does draw your mind, like make that comparison. But I actually think it was more in the sense of inevitability. That's what I remember really taking away from the Song of Achilles when I read it, was that right from the very start, Madeline Miller definitely played on the assumption that her readers knew where the story was going. And I think that every step along the way, every victory, every loss, every moment of longing felt all the more tragic because you knew the inevitable end. You don't go into the book thinking there's going to be a happy ending. And if anything, that makes that tragedy just all the more poignant. You see the places that things could have changed and don't. And I think that was the true, for me, heartbreak of the Song of Achilles. It was a tragedy in that very, very Greek sense of it. And I think this does the same. These women are both fighting against that inevitable future, very much so. We have in this Cassandra with her prophecies. Helen is drawn in to help her, and they do work first alone together, but then draw in the women of Troy, draw in a community, build that around themselves to fight against the gods that are so indifferent to their suffering, to fight against these gods that are so entitled to their bodies and their lives and their very souls. Whether or not they get a slight element of a happily ever after is for you to find out when you read it. But I think even if you know that maybe by the end isn't quite the tragedy for our protagonists that they would suffer through in the Iliad, we still do have quite a chunk of the war to get through. So there are definitely tragedies aplenty happening. A real kind of connection that B. Fitzgerald gives you here is that Cassandra is in the exact same position as the reader. The same way as the reader knows what happens in mythology, Cassandra essentially knows what happens. While we are reading a book, she's seeing these visions. She too knows where it's going, knows where she could change things if only people would listen or would behave differently. And she tries and tries to make that happen and struggles and struggles. But while she's doing that, we do see changes happen. She does have an effect on things, even as the changes she's trying to make don't come to pass necessarily. She still has an impact on the world around her, and I thought that was a really powerful message, that while you're fighting against some great evil or some, you know, something that seems like it can't possibly be changed, you have to struggle against it, even if it doesn't work out, because while those big changes might not happen, the ripple effect does, and there are minor changes that happen that can be just as important. Cassandra doesn't save everyone. She doesn't stop the war. We don't get a massive, huge, happy ending for all our characters. But she does build that community of women that don't exist in the stories. She does find this bond with Helen, and then Helen is also able to enact change. She is a Spartan queen that in her marriage has been as domesticated as possible. She has been cut down in tiny pieces again and again and again to make her less of a warrior, less of a Spartan. And now in Troy, with the men on the front, she's finally able to start getting those pieces of herself back. She starts training with the sword again, she starts running, she builds up her muscles again, and is critiqued for it, but she does it. She starts training other women, even when she's told the men will object when they find out. She even cuts off her hair and gets rebuked by Aphrodite and Paris for ruining her beauty, which is the only thing they consider her worth to be. And yet she does it, and she keeps doing it. As much as I enjoyed Games Gods Play, that was very much a reimagining. We were taking it, the characters, the dynamics out of mythology and creating something brand new. This is a reworking of that original story. What B. Fitzgerald reminds me of here, and again, maybe it's because they do share common events, but it very much reminded me of the way Natalie Haynes writes her mythology, her feminist stories. Natalie Haynes done 1,000 Ships, which again is the Iliad, but from the point of view of all the women. And I think this had that ideal as well, that yeah, she's retelling it, it's completely new, but is it? Because the Iliad only tells you the story of the men. So we don't know what happened to the women by and large. Yes, we know if they die or if they were murdered or enslaved, but we don't know who they are as characters. We don't know the choices they made on a daily basis. We're not given a picture of them as people the way we are given pictures of Achilles or Odysseus, or even some of the kings, that we at least are told, you know, how great they are or how good a warrior a certain person is. The women are very just often mentioned as the wife of or the mother of, and she dies. Obviously it's a retelling, but it could not be. It could also just be supplemental material. This is the story that's going on that you just never got told about. Obviously towards the end then we do go a little bit more fantasy, a little bit proper retelling, but for the first 75% of the book, it is a background story, and I really loved that. I thought it was a really nice addition and really showed you where women have been underrepresented in original stories like this, in the mythologies, because a lot of this could be happening without it actually making any changes. It's just that nobody thought to consider it. And obviously now we get to have some really great authors like Natalie Haynes, like B. Fitzgerald, like Madeline Miller doing that for us. and I'm just here for it. I loved it. I thought it was really good. The only critique I would have, and I almost don't know if it's a critique because having read now the two B. Fitzgeralds back to back, I think it's just her writing style. But something I did notice is that 90% of this, 99% of this is written in a very historical fantasy way. And I don't mean the elements of it, the gods and the setting, but I mean the actual language is written in what feels very like a historical fantasy or even just a historical novel. And then there are moments where certain phrases just feel very, very modern and they feel very out of place. And I'm totally up for books that take a historical setting and understand that the way that our modern ear hears that language wouldn't be the way that a contemporary ear heard that language. Taking the language and making it, okay, an insult from that time period to us sounds funny, sounds very kind of what, it sounds very light. But at that point, it might have been an absolutely dire insult. So instead of giving them that kind of wishy-washy, humorous dialogue, the author gives them something that to a modern reader sounds like the level of threat that it was supposed to be. But I think the problem is that Fitzgerald just didn't do that consistently. So while we do get one or two lines that feel very modern, they stand out against the general vibe of the book. And I think I would have preferred if she just hadn't done that and had stuck with that more historical feel throughout. I think at the moment this is the last Greek mythology retelling that B. Fitzgerald has out, but I would definitely look for more from her as an author. And if she puts out any more of these retellings, then I will absolutely be chafing at the bit to get my hands on them. I hope you enjoyed this kind of mythology themed vlog. I hope that maybe you've found one that you think would suit your tastes. If you're interested in seeing more vlogs like this where I'm looking at some quite specific theme, either a type of mythology or maybe a specific fairy tale being retold, then let me know your suggestions for that theme and the books you would maybe recommend for it in the comments, and I can look at doing those in the future. If you'd like to see those kind of vlogs when I come out with them, then please do subscribe to the channel. I always look forward to seeing your opinions on the books and your suggestions for further reading. If you've got this far, leave me a blue love heart for the end crowns all. Thank you for watching, and I really hope that I'll see you in the next videos. Goodbye.